Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 15 of Mind Clickers, where it's time to click both heads in at 2021. I'm joined here today with Dave Harris, who is the Managing Director at Guinevere Capital, currently involved in consulting and managing multiple esports projects, including London Spitfire, XL Esports, and the Esports Performance Centres at the Sydney Cricket Ground and Eden Park Stadium. And he's also part of the League of Legends OCEANIA Pro Circuit. How are you going today?
Good, thanks. That was a bit of a mouthful in the intro.
I guess what we'll just kick it off. What we usually do here on MindClick is a little bit of background about yourself, some experience within traditional sport, even, and then how you got into esports as well.
Sure. So, I was originally a sports physio back in the day. So I
Oh wow.
graduated working in sports medicine, and I was lucky enough to get into traditional sports pretty quickly. I worked with some teams in Australia. International cricket for a while. I was based in Sri Lanka, working with the Sri Lanka cricket team. Then I had 11 years in the UK, so I was lucky enough to
Wow.
work at Premier League football clubs, football league clubs, rugby, cricket. But sort of halfway through my time in UK, I'd had enough of working in sports medicine, but saw opportunities to do things better in sports business. So I
Hmm.
did the MBA at Oxford while I was over there, and so moved into sports business. I did some traditional consulting with Boston Consulting Group over, and then Gemba Group, which is a sport and entertainment consultancy around Australia.
Hmm.
And then my last real job in inverted commas, I was a general manager at National Rugby League. So I worked through marketing, content, digital, and then club and state
Hmm.
services and commercial in the end there. But mid 2016, I started to left to start Guinevere Capital, which was a sports investment business at the time. We're looking to buy some big traditional sports teams.
Hmm.
Bought an esports team as a bit of a side project at the time, the LG Direwolves. But yeah,
Yep.
that's what's happening everywhere else in the world. Didn't think Australia was going to go a different tangent, so pivoted all in on esports and built up a number of projects across Australia, and then expanded over to UK and Europe, and involved in quite a few over there as well. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, but yeah, I've sort of gone from that traditional sports into esports, as many people have. But I'm 4.5 years into esports now, so in esports
Hmm.
years that does make me a little bit of a veteran. But there are some guys around here who've been 10, 12 years, and I feel bad. So just
Yep.
rocking up at the business end. But yeah, it's a fascinating space.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, with that large wealth of knowledge, within traditional sport, did you ever imagine yourself entering the esports scene? Maybe like 6 years ago.
No, oh well, yeah, five. I actually saw esports as a bit of a competitive threat when I was in traditional sports. I think everyone's got that aha moment when they
Mm.
scratch the surface of esports and just see the numbers, and it just blows you away, and you sort of
Yep.
can't believe you weren't across this earlier. But I was
Yep.
actually sort of in the gaming space way back. So like we're back in university. This is like mid 90s. We made a play by
Hmm.
email game, which sort of shows my age. But we actually built our own game, and it got
Yep.
commercial. Got about 10,000 sign-ups, made about 50,000 cash back in the day, and yeah,
Right.
very different multiplayer games. Then we're emailing in orders, going to
Yep.
a processor that turned out your turn reports. It's in a weekly, so yeah, very different paradigm back then. But I grew up in country Victoria on a farm, so there wasn't much to do
Okay.
out there. So I did a lot of gaming. Obviously, it
Yep.
was more PVE back in the day. You could dial up a modem, but the speed wasn't really there to do
Yep.
proper multiplayer. But yeah, I sort of had a hiatus from it all for about 15 years in traditional sports. But yeah, it's just once
Hmm.
in a lifetime opportunity. Everything is happening, and it's sort of brought those passions for sort of gaming and sports business together. So yeah, I just
Hmm.
really enjoy the space I'm in at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, it sounds like that underlying background passion has really shined through, and I guess that's what a product today of Guinevere Capital is. Having that investment within traditional sport, but then also experimenting within the esports scene as well, with the Direwolves, for
Mm.
example.
Yeah, that's right. I say it's a once in a lifetime opportunity just because
Hmm.
there's very few things in sport and entertainment that come from nowhere to become a multi-billion-dollar industry in the last 30 years. I think UFC is probably about the only one. So yeah,
Mm.
it's just that point in time. It's amazing how big esports has got organically, but it's just so exciting with all the sort of the funding, the structure coming in at the moment. I think in traditional sports, you do anything to start again, and esports has
Hmm.
that chance now, and that's why I feel it's really important that we shape it as it explodes. Because yeah, 5 years ago I was banging the drum. Hey, everyone, you should be looking at esports now. Everyone's heard of it, but yeah, it's going a bit of a free for all as well. So I
Yeah.
think it's still quite important that you really try and do things the right way and try and build the whole industry as opposed to just individual projects.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at esports as a whole, especially within Oceania, it's grown so much exponentially within the last 5 years. We've seen a lot more competitions come out, tournaments, even organizations. Everything's starting to just steadily increase in rampant growth. How do you see that? I guess in the next 5 years, do you think that esports is just going to be the complete norm? That we're going to have teams competing everywhere across Australia?
Yeah, I think different regions at different stages of the journey. So, like Korea's been there for a long time. I think
Yep.
Australia and New Zealand are probably a little bit behind on that, but yeah, I have no doubt. And if you look at specific sort of demographics or age brackets, it always is a norm. I think if you're speaking to
Hmm.
an 18-year-old or 16-year-old at the moment, they're probably just as likely to follow esports as traditional sports. And in some ways, I feel
Yep.
it's quite sad because I come out of traditional sports, and I think the average age of a
Hmm.
AFL fans 45, NRL fans 47, and it's almost getting a year older each year. So I think the reason I was so excited about esports in the first place is like it had a lot of themes like the sort of move away from linear broadcast and sort of advertising or
Hmm.
sort of pay TV model towards some digital distribution, digital communities, social media, etc. And
Hmm.
then the pandemic's obviously just fast tracked a lot of those themes. So I think
Yep.
my belief is actually things we get right in esports will actually help traditional sports in the long run. I think traditional sports will start pivoting a bit closer to esports at some stage.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that esports has that opportunity to go do it over. What do you think that esports can take from the lessons learned that traditional sports went through in regards to trialing and testing different things?
Yeah, so it's got all the same challenges. I think things like gambling integrity, all these sort of things that you don't want to
Yeah.
highlight because everyone's just sort of necessarily just because it becomes a sensationalist headline and you see a lot of
Hmm.
media outlets going it. But I think it's yeah, if you look at sort of the journey traditional sports has been on, and they've had to get these gambling integrity measures in there, sort of the data sharing, the systems. I don't think performance enhancing drugs or anything like that is a major problem at the moment. But yeah,
Hmm.
there's both the safeguards and systems, but more on the education front. And I think
Yep.
um, similar to traditional sports, there's a lot of people coming in wanting to become esports stars. Only the lucky few
Hmm.
make it. So it's having those sort of
Yep.
systems where we're developing people, and once players' careers are over, they can transition into other parts and just yeah,
Hmm.
the welfare piece. I think in traditional sports, we've now got academy systems and a whole pathways for developing talent. I think esports is fast tracking getting those in place. But yeah, there's a lot that can be learnt from traditional sports where it's taken over 100 years to get to where it is at the moment. And esports is sort of like that on steroids as far as how fast it's evolving. And
Yep.
yeah, there'll be plenty of mistakes made along the way, but hopefully we can see some of them
Hmm.
coming.
Yeah, for sure. In regards to that developmental process that you talked about just briefly, then, obviously, in regards to, I guess, the lifespan of esports and that kind of initial stage of it, we see that, I guess, some universities are starting to adopt esports programs. So, do you think that the adoption of these programs is going to allow, I guess, that earlier youth to have that more so targeted and direct approach into esports is going to be that direct pathway? And do you think that that's going to enable more of a rampant growth within the scene?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if you look at North America, their traditional sports model is very ingrained in the university system, and it's a high school
Mm,
university that is the pathway for traditional sports. Whereas not so much in this part of the world. But yeah, I think there's a big opportunity. Like we work with a number of universities and also some businesses that are peripheral to universities. And if you look at the demographic, aside from the academic benefits of it, it's great marketing for them. Obviously, there's a group of people in that age demographic, and particularly where overseas students in normal times are a big part of
mm,
their revenue streams. Having a strong
yeah.
esports program is actually great for their businesses as much as anything else, and yeah, it's great to see what a couple of the Queensland universities are doing when it comes to investing in facilities and
Hmm.
programs. So yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity. We've got an academic industry collaboration with University of Technology Sydney and their sports science faculty. We've
Okay.
had guys working in our esports high performance centres. And yeah, one of them was doing a PhD on what are the key indicators of esports performance. If it's nature, how can we recruit for it? If it's nurture, how can we train it? And yeah,
Fantastic.
there's a lot of overlap with the groups out there. There's some in Waikato in New Zealand as well. So yeah, there's a
Hmm.
lot happening in this part of the world. Also in UK where we're operating, not just individual universities, but the student groups, Newell, etc., and BSE. They have their own
Hmm.
they have their own sort of intercollegiate and university in the school competitions. And there's also
Hmm.
private operators coming in as well. So Meta, which is attached to Legacy Esports over in this region. But yeah,
Yep.
I think it's a huge opportunity for engaging young people in something they're passionate about. It's great for the universities to differentiate themselves from others.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think just people enjoy it, and it's great for just as it's great to have your local football club. It's great to have your local esports club, which some people at universities will use to come together and socialise.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I think earlier on my because I had Tim Joyce on, so
Yeah.
he actually founded the University of Queensland's esports program, and it was really interesting hearing that kind of underlying developmental process that went into it and everything that goes into creating an esports program. And one of the biggest things we talked about is this idea of regulation and having a regulated esports scene. So you think that in regards to that regulation, if we don't have that regulated scene and we go into an unregulated scene, then that's where all the problems can arise in terms of addictions and all those sort of underlying, again, health problems.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm obviously a massive believer in balance and structure
Hmm.
around programs to make sure, that the people aren't just sitting down playing games 18 hours a day and that's
Yeah.
what they're doing. Um, yeah, but regulation is hard because, like, again, this is a commercial entity for everyone from the publishers down as well. So
Hmm.
you see a lot of governing bodies in inverted commas popping up all around the world, and
Yeah.
regulators of various different bits and pieces. I guess that, like, most people have great intentions, but yeah, everyone also has their own commercial interests. So it's just like,
Yeah.
who's in charge of what is always a bit of a bit of like, even all the way to ESIC. Like, obviously they do some great work, sort of
Hmm.
trying to detect issues, etc. But again, at the end of the day, they're fighting for a slice of a pie and funding to do what they
Yep.
want to do. So I think it's important that we put structure around it. From my point of view, we like to stay very close to the publishers. That they do great work in sort of helping build
Hmm.
an ecosystem. Obviously, Riot Games is very hands-on. Something like Valve is very hands-off. So yeah,
Yep.
it's an incredibly complex ecosystem. So yeah, I think that you do need to um, create opportunities to educate people and make sure they're doing the right things. But I just I'm a little bit wary of the word regulation because then it comes down to
Mm.
who's regulating who.
Yeah. In regards to that ecosystem you just talked about briefly, when we look at that from an external approach, what makes a team, I guess, investable? What are the characteristics that you look for in regards to a team? Is it looking for track records? Is it looking for, future, inevitable performances? What is it the kind of things that you kind of look for?
Similar to any business, I think the founders or the management are the key. It's a people business, and there aren't that many
Right.
tangible assets, to be honest, in esports. So you're
Yep.
backing someone to build it. Obviously, with the franchise systems popping up around the world, then it's becoming a little bit different. And I think they've been an important step to bring in more investment. You're
Hmm.
not threatened by relegation, and if you have a bad year, everything's sort of blowing up. So it's that North American model where you have recurring revenue streams and distributions from sort of central media deals or sponsorship deals. So, I think if you can get yourself into one of those franchise ecosystems, and it's never been cheap, and it's getting even less so. But
Yep.
if you can get into that space, that's great. I think that gives you some stability, and that gives you a narrative that you can raise investor money from around. But at the smaller end of the spectrum, particularly in the early days, I guess looking back 5 years, it's a people business, and
Hmm.
making sure you've got people that understand esports and games, but also get the bigger picture of building a business and revenue streams and allocating costs and resources, etc. So at the end of
Hmm.
the day, it's a business just like any other business, and I think people quite often lose sight of that, whether it's esports or sports.
Yep.
Someone needs to pay the bills at the end of the day. So
100%. In regards to, I guess, revenue and I guess not revenue, resources, I am, on my clicks, I've had quite a few, sports psychologists, a couple of professional players on board, and they always, at the end of the day, the big question that remains is this idea of resources and the available resources that a team has to spend, whether that be on, international competition, whether that be on hiring external allied health professionals to help provide that underlying, mental health benefits. So I guess in regards to OCE, what's it going to take for us to be on the same level as the big guys in NA and NEU?
realistically, that's not going to happen when it comes to a direct comparison. I reckon we can
Hmm.
get to where EU and NA are now, but by that time they'll be they'll be well
There'll
ahead.
be a wait ahead.
It's just a scale issue, and that's why we're involved in Europe. And like we have some much bigger checks going to Europe, just because
Hmm.
it's so much bigger. And we're always
Yep.
going to have this A League versus English Premier League. It's just a matter of it's a market size thing. There's 700 million people in Europe. There's 25 million people in Australia, and we're incredibly isolated on this side of the world. So,
Yep.
yeah, I think it's really, and that's been part of us repositioning and relaunching the LCO off the back of the OPL. I think it was really
Hmm.
important to reset the model and build something that's sort of fit for purpose for this region and sustainable. So, sustainability
Hmm.
is a big part of it, and similar to again philosophically, I'd love to have sports psychologists, physios, every allied health professional around a team. But
Yep.
I think you need to be realistic with the state of the industry at the moment. There's
Yep.
a lot of chances for experience and sort of working with teams and to build something together. But
Hmm.
yeah, there aren't that many senior people who are going to get a full time paycheck out of esports in this
Yep.
region. So we really are in that sort of crossover semi pro and yeah area. And I think there's certainly opportunities to get involved, but yeah, to be a full time professional in esports coming out of one of those disciplines, it's tough. The money needs to come from somewhere, and yeah, we're still really just trying to stabilize the region at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of those kind of ideal scenarios. I know that, graduating with a Bachelor of Sport and Exercise Science, obviously esports is my biggest passion.
Mm,
So I wanted to go directly into
mm,
esports. And it was kind of that question mark how I was going to do that because obviously, as you just said, it's not sustainable, especially in regards to some of these teams that don't have the available resources to invest in, a sports psych or a sports scientist or,
mm,
it's that early developmental
yeah.
stage. Um,
But at the same
so that's
time,
why I
it's
went,
yeah, it's about like the casters, the players, yeah,
yeah,
various talent. We are a pathway to overseas, and we're really well regarded in this region. Nutritional sports and now esports, we're really starting to take a mark. So
yeah,
I think yeah, anyone who does really well in this environment is sort of yeah building their CV and their reputation to be picked up by an overseas organisation that will have those resources and have put if you
mm,
put tens of millions into a franchise or spending 300 to 400,000 a year on a player, then yeah, you're crazy not to actually spend the extra 50 and look
yeah.
after them with yeah with the right staff around them. Whereas yeah,
Yep.
it's a little bit different over this side of the world. But if you look at Excel Esports, I think their program there with
Mm,
Fabian is one of the best around, and yeah,
yep.
there's been a lot of investment over there into looking after the players.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely saw some of those, some of the resources those guys have in terms of their gym facilities and some of the facilities that they're developing, which is fantastic to see, especially for addressing player health at the elite level. I think it's crucial to ensure longevity within the sport as well,
Yeah.
because you see a lot of early guys just retiring so early. 23,
Mm.
24 year olds are retiring, and as a role of being allied health professionals, I think it's our role to ensure that longevity within the scene.
Yeah, agree.
Now, in regards to these high performance centers, take us through what these look like and what's the ultimate goal for for these centers.
So our philosophy has always been to bring together traditional sports and esports, both from
Hmm.
a commercialization but also a performance standpoint. Obviously, esports has its nuances. Not everything crosses over, but I think there's a lot that does translate.
Hmm.
And then, so the original esports high performance center, it's the Sydney Cricket Ground.
Yep.
Quite frankly, I just spent the morning bumping stuff back in. I was sort of one night I'm trying to do a $10 million deal. The next I'm hauling chairs across out of a high van. But yeah,
Really doing everything.
yeah,
Doing everything.
we've yeah we've had sort of limited access over the last 12 months. Obviously, stadiums because of the pandemic situation and
Yep.
the COVID protocols. It's been difficult, but we're bumping
Hmm.
back in to launch the SCG. Excel Esports obviously has a similar philosophy and a facility in Twickenham Stadium over there, and then yeah, we're just launching our new latest facility in Eden Park Stadium, which
Fantastic.
by the time this comes out, will all be announced. So yeah, it's the Spark Esports Hub. So Spark, New Zealand's national telco, are headline sponsors, which is really exciting. Which is
Fantastic.
yeah, let us really polish it up and build it up. So and Logitech are involved as well. So but yeah, the philosophy behind these things is obviously there's a commercial component, and when you're making content and bringing investors and sponsors and holding events, obviously a massive stadium backdrop does give it that bit of grandeur, and particularly for the boomer audience,
Mhm.
it makes it real as opposed to a gaming house out in the
Yep.
out in the suburbs. But we also get access to all their facilities there. Yeah, the gyms obviously we've got our own
Right.
fitness trainers, etc. Particularly the SCG Oscar there from the Hyper Performance podcast. He does a lot of work with our athletes in our programs here. So it's a
Hmm.
yeah, it's a great opportunity to do that, and even just mixing with the professional sports teams. So we've had collaborations and crossover events with the Sydney Swans. We've
Oh
done
wow.
stuff with the Sydney Roosters, etc. Yeah, we work closely with some of the football clubs, Western Sydney
Hmm.
Wanderers, and more recently Western United Football Club through the
Yep.
E League program. So yeah, it's been a great chance to sort of interact, and we've cross-sold sponsorships. Yeah, we've done great esports versus sports content. As you've
Hmm.
probably seen around the world, most sports people are real gamers as well. So
Yep.
yeah, it's been a great chance to become a part of the community. And at Sydney Cricket Ground, that's actually the largest sporting hub of sports teams in the world, and they'll say they've got
Mm.
seven traditional sports teams there, and esports teams as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really supportive and really important for their narrative, both similar to Twickenham in the RFU or Sydney Cricket Ground. They've got an aging member base, and they need a way to bring
Hmm.
new content and new fans to enjoy their facilities, and esports is part of that narrative of really trying to engage a younger generation.
Yeah, fantastic. I really can see how it can definitely combine and connect the two generations between traditional sport and esports, and
Mm.
really, connect that pathway looking into 5, 10 years. And do you think that obviously, so we have, I believe in traditional sports in regards to the AFL, we have Essendon and Adelaide have their own esports teams. So do you see that other AFL teams, NRL teams starting to bring out their esports teams as well?
Yeah, Essendon, yeah, one split in League of Legends and went to yeah MSI. They're not involved anymore in the latest
Okay.
iteration, but yeah, Legacy, which is owned by Adelaide Crows, is a great example. And not only have
Hmm.
they invested in a team who won both splits last year and went to the world champs, and probably did the best of any Australian team over there. But we've also
Yep.
got Meta Esports, so they're quite involved in the university and the high school programs.
Right.
I think if you look what the AFL does really well compared to other sports is captures people early. They get into the schools, they get into
Hmm.
they get people young with their AusKit program is probably one of the most
Yeah.
recognised programs around the world. That's the key to sort of um, catch people young, and you have a fan for life. And give them a free pie and a cap, and get them running around the field at 7 years old, and then yeah, 20 years later, they'll still be fans of the sport and the club. So
Yep.
yeah, I think AFL do that really well, and I think Adelaide Crows have done really well with esports as far as being part of that pathway,
Hmm.
and sort of helping people into the sport as a young, or the esport as they're young. So yeah, I think Legacy's done really well here, and then obviously internationally,
Mm.
you've seen a number of traditional sports teams get involved. It's it's quite basic. Sometimes a bit of foresight, but the big one at the moment is Schalke 04 in League of Legends European Championships, who
Right.
unfortunately they've done incredibly well, and they're in the playoffs, but the traditional sports team behind them has just imploded. And just got relegated. There's a big team that no one ever thought would be relegated, and obviously combined with the pandemic. So yeah, it's quite funny when you're potentially trying to sell off your esports assets to fund your traditional sport, where they're doing better than others. But yeah, particularly in North America, you see a number of traditional sports
Hmm.
owners investing in esports, and it's almost a
Yeah.
hedge to their traditional business. It's sort of yeah, and these numbers sound massive when you're talking 20 or 30 million for a franchise, but that's probably
Hmm.
linebacker for some of them. So it's yeah, it's not really that big an investment for them. And again, some of them are using their infrastructure, so it's sweating your assets harder when you've got guys like the
Hmm.
Cronkiers involved who own Arsenal, or the Crafts who own Green Bay Packers, or Comcast, these big players. It's yeah,
Yep.
they can obviously see the way things are going, and yeah, it is very similar to their traditional model.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that in regards to some of these teams, there's a little bit of hesitation in regards to getting into esports? Some teams that are so profoundly rich, in traditional sports, and then all of a sudden, invest into esports. There might be, from from a fan perspective, from that older generation perspective, they might start to think, "Hang on, what's going on here?"
Yeah. Yeah, it is an issue. I love when we've done stuff with the Sydney Swans and even with Excel Esports and the partnership with Deli Ali over there. It's tough because the older crowd is particularly you almost need to time your announcements when things aren't going on the field. It's why you're messing around playing games or why you spend that
Yeah.
money on a new forward rather than rather than an esports team. But yeah,
Yep.
I think there's people you're never going to win over, but it's great for
Hmm.
engagement because when these things kick off, it's almost like intergenerational war with
Hmm.
um, if they say, "Why don't you get outside and play a real sport?" There'll be plenty of people responding to them online, particularly if they want to start the argument on Twitter rather than in the pub. So
Yep.
I think it's great engagement, and esports isn't going to be for everyone, with some
Hmm.
of the older generation, but I think it's just it's growing with time, and some people are into different pastimes, but I think it's getting to the point where you can legitimately make a case for esports, but back to traditional sports teams, I think they need to be really cognizant, and this goes for business and for everyone. Why you're getting to esports? It's sort of like
Hmm.
sometimes we need an esports strategy. It's just a euphemism for we need a strategy to engage in a younger audience. But yeah, starting an
Hmm.
esports team isn't just necessarily the answer. That's not the silver bullet. It needs to be much of
Yep.
part of a much broader engagement strategy and a lot more thought rather than let's do esports. But yeah, some people have done it well, but there's plenty of cases of traditional sports players coming into esports and not doing it as well, and hitting home tail between the legs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you see some traditional sports athletes, basketball players. I think some NRL players just online as well in regards to Twitch and YouTube, just doing content creation for some teams as well. And I think that's helping to, I guess, bridge the gap as well, and start to pick up different audiences and start to look down different streams as well, which is obviously good for the scene as well.
Yeah, I agree, and particularly in the pandemic, it's sort of it's
Hmm.
people are actually now understanding this is just a way to socialise and like
Yep.
back in my generation, it was down the milk bar playing pinball machines or the
Yeah.
the original Street Fighter 2. But these days it's just how people socialise and hang out, and whether
Yep.
it's a group of friends playing games together or just a chance to actually interact with some of the big stars, traditional sports or otherwise. It's just the way of the world these days. It's become the norm.
Hmm. Do you think that the fact, of because of the pandemic, obviously we can, I think across the board say that esports flourished in that scene. Obviously, online competitions still resumed whilst traditional sports competitions got cancelled. But in that sense, if the pandemic didn't happen, do you still think that esports would be in the same position as it is, or we'd be back a little bit?
I think the trajectory was the same. It just fast tracked. It just fast tracked
Okay.
things, and like we had a 5 year probably um, time horizon for investment thesis that suddenly happened over a few months. So yeah, no,
Right.
so it was always going to happen, but yeah, just like whether it's people now taking meetings by Zoom as just being the norm rather than heading to the office. I
Yeah.
think many things changed, and it was the way the world was going, but many people were resistant to that change, but it was suddenly forced
Hmm.
upon them. So
Yep.
I think that the numbers may subside, but yeah, once you start watching Twitch or YouTube rather than turning on Channel 7 or Channel 9, it's from my point of view, it's having that over the top service to watch it whenever you want, be it a yeah, be it something like a Netflix or
Hmm.
something like YouTube. It I can't understand going back to the old way. I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and telling them what time they need to watch something on TV. It's going to be they just can't comprehend. Why would you need to sit down at a certain time to watch something? It's just sort of
Yeah.
it's just the way some generations were brought up. It just makes no sense, really.
Yep. So, do you think that in that regards, looking towards esports on TV is completely out of the question? We're just way too beyond that now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of conversations happening with traditional broadcasters, but it's more about
Hmm.
using esports for their new digital platforms. I think
Right.
people who think put esports on TV, then all of a sudden the esports audience is going to move back to linear television are completely missing the point.
Yeah.
But I think what traditional broadcasters do well, like a Fox Sports or Sky Sports or whoever, is
Yep.
shoulder content and do the stories.
Yeah.
I think it's the main broadcast, probably not, but yeah, be it a reality show or an access documentary or something. I think there's definitely still a place for and like people
Hmm.
like Amazon do it really well, so maybe that's where it'll happen. But
Yeah.
I don't see sort of turning on the gameplay for the main broadcast. And because the length of these matches, particularly in the
Yeah.
fives or something like League of Legends, where there's no sort of fixed point, yeah, it's really
Mhm.
hard to schedule in. So yeah, I think esports is more suited to the digital platform, but I think a lot of the broadcasters may use esports to try and build up the digital platforms, because at the moment live sport and reality TV are the only things keeping linear broadcast alive, because
Mm.
you don't want to time shift it because the results get spoiled on social media or whatever. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think the time, and that's why I'm excited about esports. You've got obviously Amazon aiming Twitch, Google with YouTube, Facebook
Mhm.
Live. They're battling it out at the moment in esports, but with time, I think they'll be the major players in traditional sports, and you're starting to see that already.
Yeah. Do you ever think that in regards to those three, Facebook, YouTube, and Google, there's opportunity for collaboration, or everyone's just going to go their own route?
I hope they're in competition rather than collaboration. Those have
Okay.
enough power already without them going all cartel on
Yeah.
us. But yeah, I think actually healthy competition between those major platforms is really important for the industry, and that will
Mhm.
drive revenues in time. And it's not just sort of Amazon with Twitch now. Yeah, obviously Amazon Prime, and yeah,
Mm.
we've been speaking to Google, and they're not just YouTube. Google has so many services as well. Like how can all these pieces come together? And yeah, so I think looking at the world is not just about the eyeballs watching something; it's about the data. And yeah,
Mhm.
these players are next level on that front. And yeah, esports is just one of a number of ways to engage a demographic. And we're saying it's young demographic, but it's sort of as I said, the average age of traditional sports fans seems to be getting 1 year old every year. But in esports, the
Mhm.
bottom of the funnel keeps filling, but people are sticking with it. Like you're not a freak as a 30-year-old sitting down watching a game of esports. It's pretty much
Yeah.
just par for the course.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I guess, even with esports professionals now, that age of entry is just lower and lower. We're seeing 11, 12-year-olds competing professionally, in different cups and in different tournaments. And I guess that is just going to get lower and lower potentially. And, there's complications with that, obviously, in regards to health, in regards to longevity of players. But I guess from that kind of perspective of engagement and interest, the scene is getting younger. And I guess that can only be better, right?
Yeah, I think for professional players, good. Some of the leagues have a minimum age, be it 16 or 17. So
Hmm.
particularly now, people dropping into sort of structured academy systems and going full time. Yeah,
Yep.
I think it's good that we sort of gate the entry age a little bit. Obviously, they can do the semi-pro stuff and be that prodigy for a while, but holding
Hmm.
back their entrance into the full-time professional scene's probably not such a bad thing. But what I'm really interested on is actually the other end of players used to burn out and be gone by 23, 24. Now guys are on
Yeah.
$1 million contracts. They're not walking away for any time soon. So it'll be interesting to see how long they can hold
Yep.
on to now. You're sort of getting players past 25 and they're
Yep.
retiring around 27. But I know your reflexes do start to drop off a little bit at that age, but there are many other
Hmm.
traits which keep going up, like your working memory. So yeah,
Yep.
I think a combination is of the amount we play and the way they train, and people do burn out. But if we can
Hmm.
optimize that, yeah, well, why can't players play at least as long as a traditional sports player, and maybe not, maybe even longer?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess from that, perspective, we are athletes, and in that regards, maybe not physical athletes, but more so cognitive athletes. And I guess, in regards to burnout, it's one of those big things that you see with a lot of professional players. Obviously, in regards to traditional sports, you'd probably be, practicing or training on the field for 2 to 4 hours a day. But then on the flip side, esports is a lot more extreme than that. You can get people practicing 12, 15 hours a day. So
Yeah.
I guess that's why one of the reasons that burnout does occur a bit more regularly.
Yeah, we try and hold them back, put a bit of structure around it, and sort of have as much longer
Hmm.
viewing as actually playing. But I think one
Yep.
of the challenges is the gaming house model. So yeah, just putting
Hmm.
people together 24/7 is like it's something you do in a reality TV show to try and create friction. But
Yeah.
the model coming out of Korea, I've never convinced it's the optimal model. So yeah, I think one day hopefully we've got training facilities and people live by themselves and then come in for their day's training and work and then go home and have a bit more of a balanced
Hmm.
life. I think they'll have a lot to it, but yeah, some of these players aren't ready to be released in the wild yet, even though they're 18 to 22. They don't seem to be able to fend for themselves and cook a basic meal. So yeah, there's probably some education to
Yeah.
be done there.
How long do you think before that standardized, I guess, esports culture will be a lot more present?
I think that's the exciting thing. Everyone's still finding the way and yeah, the
Hmm.
optimal route. Some of it comes down to funding, but yeah, a lot of it's evolved out of out of the Korean model. Obviously, they were the best players in the world at one stage, and in a lot of cases still are.
Yep.
But Korean culture is very different to the rest of the world, and they don't dominate traditional sports. And so that's why I think, particularly, you see Europe rising it now by
Yep.
doing things a little bit smarter and developing talent. And um, obviously, China's doing very well. It's just a game of numbers. Whether you've got a billion people, there must be some decent players in
Yeah.
there somewhere. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
I'll be interested to see whether the Western model can evolve and start overtaking. And there are specific games where, particularly Europeans already up there. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, the North American model, we like throwing stones at them when they get things wrong, and all their fans
Yeah.
tear them apart enough as is. But yeah, it's that's why I'm so excited. I don't think anyone's nailed the model yet. Everyone's got theories, but
Mm.
um, yeah, at the end of the day, like this is almost a counterpoint. Like we try and do everything best practice and try and be leaders in certain areas of sort of health,
Yep.
wellness, player development. But what I've also learned at the end of the day, five players who are very good at playing the game, even if they do anything wrong, they're probably still going to be your players who are just good, even if you do everything right.
Yep.
It's those few percent that make a difference. But yeah, at the end of the day, the whole scene's probably not enough evolved enough yet for for that
Hmm.
few percent to be making a difference in every game. But at the same time, just from a health and wellness point of view, and just feeling good about your life and sustainability of it all, I don't know why players
Yep.
wouldn't do everything they could to have that lifestyle that's a bit more balanced and sustainable.
Mm. It's going to be really interesting now that you kind of bring it up, that kind of model difference between, I guess, the Asian model and then the Western model, and we know how we outperform each other. Because obviously, in traditionally, the Asian model has been pretty dominant. For example, in StarCraft, the South Koreans have pretty much dominated the scene for the last 10 years or so. And then obviously, SK Telecom One in League and stuff like that. Early seasons of League. But then obviously in regards to the Western model, we start to, I guess, incentivize more so this health performance model. So, it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, before that starts to outweigh more of this game, strict focus kind of schedule.
Yeah, it's I think the Korean model is very hierarchical. So yeah,
Yeah.
the coach says jump, every player says how high, whereas which doesn't really resonate as much with Western culture. But that actually is quite an efficient way to an extent. But my
Yep.
view and a lot of the view of a lot of people where we're talking to is six voices are better than one. So yeah, by actually
Hmm.
sort of discussing and debating what the best better is, what the best way to play is,
Yep.
is optimal. But yeah, at the same time, when you get five very confident, maybe entitled young people, it's sometimes hard to get that collaborative group environment. So
Yep.
yeah, my view is if you can get it right, then yeah, probably that type of model is better. But it is much harder to get right, and the challenge is like in traditional sports, you've got a coach that played the game for years and has been out for 20 years coaching. Whereas yeah, in esports, actually developing the coaches is probably the key. That's why we
Hmm.
spend a lot of time working on coaching the coaches because yeah, at the end of the day, they're finding their way too, and it's putting
Yep.
performance directors beside them, and yeah, we're lucky in Excel, the team we're involved in, League of Legends.
Hmm.
Over there, yeah, Joe Youngbuck, he's won 6 of 10 European titles. It's and watching him and Fabian, who's the performance director, um, they're the best I've seen anywhere.
Mm.
I haven't been really involved over there for quite some time. Pandemic means I haven't even left the country for the last 12 months. But yeah,
Yep.
when I've watched them, they've been yeah, incredible to watch. So I
Mm.
think with time they'll get there. But yeah, with Excel, they keep finishing seventh every year, missing the playoffs by one spot. So
Oh,
yeah,
right.
having the best paid coaching staff and facilities and programs. Yeah, at the end of the day, when you've got G2 and a bunch of freakish players, it's very hard to
Yep.
unseat that. Although, yeah, this year it's great to see a bunch of youngsters come through from Mad Lions and yeah, take the title, at
Yep.
least split one.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be really interesting. And I guess, obviously with League being the most dominant, the most dominant game in this kind of, battle between, I guess, models and battle between, I guess, NA versus EU. Do you think that any other game is as close to, as this severity as League is?
Um, yeah, well, it's interesting. Like in Overwatch is at the moment is so we've been involved in London Spitfire, and that one has been
Hmm.
because we've done that complete transition where um, Jack was very smart. He when they formed the Overwatch League, the Koreans were the leaders. He got two of the best Korean teams, mashed them together to make London Spitfire, and they won. Yeah, they won the inaugural championship.
Yep.
And then sort of following that they tried that method again with Korean rookies, and sort of there was diminishing returns on it, I guess, as others
Yep.
caught up. I think there's a strong belief that in those circles that mixed teams are very hard to get to work together, and it's both a communication language barrier, but also from cultural point of view, it's
Hmm.
yeah, it's the Korean model and the Western model, unless those players have been involved in Western teams for a long time. Sometimes it does clash. But this year we've done a complete 180 since we got involved. So we've basically had London Spitfires had the dominant contenders team in Europe, the British Hurricane,
Yep.
and so we've promoted a lot of those players and sort of supplement them with sort of Western talent, predominantly European, and even some UK, which is great for London Spitfire to have someone from Britain in it. So part of it's been a marketing
Hmm.
narrative to connect with the fans, but we've also got a genuine belief that there's no reason European talent can't be dominant. And to be honest, a lot of players through that Hurricanes roster have then gone on to other teams and do very well. And I think the challenge with StarCraft or League of Legends has been around 10 years plus, so there's a first move advantage. Whereas with some of the newer
Hmm.
games, everyone starts on a level playing field, so there's not that legacy
Yep.
of one region getting into it before another or whatever. It's sort of So I think it creates a lot
Mm.
of opportunities. So I've been really positive about the new London Spitfire Western roster. They've
Mm.
absolutely got smashed last weekend in the opening in their opening game. So hopefully it's just early season jitters. But I think longer term there's a lot to be said for it.
For sure, that sounds fantastic. In regards to your role, obviously as managing director, so do you go and visit, for example, XL Sports, and see the performance, see the facilities, or what does that entail?
With the project, I'm normally very hands on early on. So now I'm not really
Okay,
operational involved at all. Like we're almost passive investors. Obviously, I chat to some of the guys now and
gotcha.
again. But the in that first couple of years, so we bought Excel Esports when it was effectively a Division Three team, a Yeovil town.
Mm,
It was a good UK organisation, but UK scene wasn't developed at all. So
gotcha.
yeah, sort of being that process of applying for the League of Legends European Championship as a franchise, and we were dark horses, and so to come from nowhere and get that, and that was announced, I think the last day in November, and then we at the first split started mid January, so effectively there's 6 weeks to build an entire
Hmm.
organisation from scratch. It had 3 staff at the time and nothing
Wow.
else. So sort of for that first 18 months, 2 years, I was pretty much back and forth to UK every month, and there was a lot of people working on
Wow.
it, but just like Twickenham, I was in there plugging in the computers for the first boot camp in December. We had a travel agent just trying to book flights in from people all over the world, and it
Yep.
was just sort of all hands on deck. And like that first year was a complete debacle. But having been through these
Hmm.
things a few times, you realise that it's very hard to get things right first time round, particularly when you're in a ridiculously
Gotcha.
short timeline. But yeah, if you look at these days, I've got Valter, the ex-CEO of Fnatic, is a very experienced CEO that's running
Yep.
Excel. Got a brilliant investor group behind it. So yeah, it's sort of probably my strength is in the down and dirty bit, just making things happen, getting from very little to something of substance. But
Hmm.
it's sort of by the time you've got sort of 30, 40, 50 staff and some great management involved and everything, then yeah,
Yep.
they don't need me making suggestions. They probably just tell me to bugger off and go focus on something else. And and so, but there's always a new project. Obviously, like OPL falling over late last year, all of a sudden we're on that same journey again, just having
Hmm.
to really try and rally stakeholders and get something up and running and work with publishers, and then once winning the
Yep.
rights, then having the challenge of having to get everything in place in such a short period of time. And
Hmm.
it was great the support we got from everyone in the community for Split One. But yeah, it was bumpy. There were a lot of things that could be done
Yeah.
better. But yeah, we've got the vision of what we wanted to be, and yeah, with time things will just keep improving. And I'm sure once we're a couple of years into LCO, it'll be the same. It'll be polished, and yeah, there'll be there'll be other things for me to focus on as we yeah, as we have some great management involved running the day to day.
Yeah, for sure. In regards to, I guess, that publishing, and even in regards to the LCO, is it challenging knowing that obviously Riot owning League of Legends, but in regards to traditional sport, no one owns football or soccer, so it's hard to get into and start that process. Is that challenging?
Yeah, it is. It's just different. You need to understand it, and I guess one of the strengths
Yeah,
we've had has been we've got a track record now, so we're seen as a safe set of hands by the publishers. I've got a
gotcha.
fantastic relationship with a lot of people at the publishers, Activision Blizzard, Riot Games, and um, yeah, like they're good people, and despite what you may read in Reddit all the time, like that they actually have a real passion and love and love the game and love the esport. And so if you can help them build that, be that with a
Mm,
franchise team or a league or whatever, yeah, they're open arms. So yeah, we've done some great projects with them, be it all the way down to Direwolves initially through yeah our work in the LEC, now running the entire league over here. Um, yeah,
yep.
I think it's great to collaborate with them, and to be honest, it's as we stated earlier, there's not a lot of governance, so there's not a lot of um,
Hmm.
esports is quite fragmented, but at least with the publishers, you do have that one point where there is some sense of control, and yeah, someone is in charge at
Right.
least of some aspects of it. So
Yep.
yeah, I think it's important to have good relationships with the publishers, and yeah, that's even though when they changed their model as they did last year with OPL, it can cause a
Hmm.
bit of chaos. It's sort of a yeah longer term working side by side with them. There's a lot can be achieved.
I'll just run through a hypothetical with you now. Say, for example, you had unlimited resources and unlimited money and sponsorships and all these kind of partnerships. What would you do personally to, I guess, bring the OCE scene to the standard that it is in the EU and NA? And how long do you reckon that would take you?
Um, I think it's very important to talk about timeframes as well on that, because there's been times where people
Yep.
had virtually unlimited resources, but you need to know, are they going to be still there in 10 years or not? So I
Exactly.
think and we've seen it before where there's been a lot of investment come into this scene at times, that was done a lot of short term cool stuff. But
Hmm.
I'm a massive believer across everything in esports. You need to build, not buy, and you can definitely fast track things with
Right.
additional resources. But um, yeah, you do just need to walk before you can run in a lot of cases, and there are things you can
Gotcha.
fast track, but there are things that just take time. And yeah, I always say everyone thinks esports is bigger than it is in the short term and underestimates how big it is in the long term. I think with
Yep.
additional resources, there's lots of things you could spend it on and improve things, but yeah, there's just no shortcuts at the end of the day. There's a lot of
Okay.
work to be done, but I think from the from the league point of view, again, the pandemic is sort of covering this up at the moment because it limits the amount we can do. But I think long term, I'm a big believer in training facilities external to gaming houses. Obviously, we've got two esports high performance centres. Some of the other teams facilities in Melbourne and the Fortress down in Melbourne as well. There's a number of things sort of popping up
Hmm.
now. So I think it's important to have those separate facilities, getting players together in those facilities. So whether it's whether it's in a yeah sort of a complex or whether you've got everyone in team houses, but I think having everyone together in the same city makes a big difference. I think staff is really important. You do get diminishing returns for more and more staff, but a really good coach,
Mm.
really good analyst, and then we call them performance directors, but yeah, you call them sports psychologists. You can call them sort of sports physiologists or whatever. But it's sort of
Hmm.
I think that's a really important counterfoil to we need a coach that really understands the game, and then you need in game, and you need someone who really understands the outer game. And sometimes that could be the same person, but yeah, I think they're
Yep.
your core performance staff. But in traditional sports as well as esports, people over invest in performance and then forget about all the stuff that pays the bills.
Hmm.
So obviously, it's really important social media content, the marketing side, and then off the back of that
Yep.
to pay the bills. Someone's got to get some commercial revenue coming in, and esports sort of over indexes towards sponsorship at the moment. Short term, we just need a lot more people out there educating and selling in esports to the traditional brands. But it's sort of a virtuous circle. You need that reach and that quality of content and that polish to be able to do it. So I think end of the day is about building a reach as much as anything. Then you have something commercialized. And yeah, we can do it incrementally. I don't think there's an easy way to growth hack it. Just throwing more money at
Yep.
it. I just think it does take time. But all these things like grassroots programs, high school programs, university programs. I think it's sort of building that community. And whether or not they're
Hmm.
tuning in to watch it, they just sort of have a shared passion of the games, whatever they are. Um,
Yep.
and then, yeah, I think obviously Riot Games invested heavily in this region at one stage, but you see Ubisoft with Rainbow Six putting a bit of effort at the moment. I think you're going to see more and more from EA Sports FIFA, but yeah, I think it's
Mm.
if every game put in the same sort of effort that Riot did over sort of a 5-6 year period previously, that would make a lot of difference. So I think it's yeah, a lot of it needs to come down from the publishers or have the publishers sort of come up with sort of a trusted partner, be it sort of Guinevere and ESL or whoever, to actually sort of plan a flag and start building a scene. And then yeah, more live events is the key because you can talk about esports, but similar to actually having facilities in a stadium, when you go and someone goes into a live event, that's when they
Hmm.
suddenly get it. It's very hard to talk about esports and people get their head around it if they
Yep.
haven't been to one of those big live events. But when you're in there, you can see it doesn't matter if it's basketball, tiddlywinks, or computer games happening in the middle. It's that shared experience of the crowd. When something good
Yep.
happens, everyone cheers. When someone messes up, everyone holds their head. And there's that sort of community coming together. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, more live events. Obviously, Melbourne Esports Open. Fingers crossed, it can get back up again this year. But
Yep.
we're really working hard to bring more events to this region, be it in New Zealand, Sydney, or Melbourne, or Perth. There's a lot of support coming, and that's where the sort of the state governments may be able to, similar to traditional sports, to support esports even more. The Victorian government have done some
Mm.
fantastic work with the Melbourne Esports Open, and hopefully there'll be some support more broadly. And then, yeah, I guess finally, again, post pandemic, there's not much we do at the moment, but travelling more. I think going to
Hmm.
the challenge for Australia and New Zealand is it's so isolated. So back in the day when we were sort of dominating with direwolves, we'd send them over to Korea to boot camp, and that made a
Yep.
massive difference. And then eventually that was part of the course for most teams at one stage, but just be able to compete at that higher level makes a massive difference.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate that. That really nice summary that really puts it into perspective for a lot of listeners. And I think that I do have a lot of parents and a lot of older adults listening, really starting to understand the esports scene, engage that kind of progression. And I think the way you've put it is, that you really need to address first and foremost the fundamentals. And as you said, you can't really buy it; you have to build it. And I really like that in regards to esports. It's one of those things that it takes time, and time is inevitable for it to happen. So once we can start to build it, and then that's after it's built and we have the fundamentals established, that's when we can really start to furnish it out and address all the specifics of teams and address all the specifics of travel and how everything really starts to work together in a tournament setting.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And yeah, with all the investment flooding in at the moment too, it's sometimes it's it just makes me shake the head. Of some ways it's applied, and yeah,
Yep.
you're starting to see more and more stuff's listed on various exchanges, and yeah, it's
Mm.
quite funny. We're going through a cycle of some of the original venture capitalists are starting to ask a few questions, but then you get something floated on the Nasdaq, and then suddenly goes to the moon. So it's
Yep.
it's interesting times.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on today, Mike Lickers, Dave. I really appreciate it. Going through some of your background experience within esports, traditional sports, addressing some of those high performance centers, and that growth strategy behind them, and then also really looking at that the economic system divide between Western and Asian models. I thought that was really interesting. So I hope all of our listeners have really got a couple of little bit of extracted information that can really be solidified in regards to an insight into the resources and mindset of someone like yourself.
Great. Really appreciate your time having a chat.
Thank you very much, Dave. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. See ya.